Good morning, crypto Twitter is Misty Crypto, spreading crypto with doctor showing its benefits to my generation. Shout out to all my people, Gen Z needs to be included. It's really that simple. We are savage, amazed, boss, SD, making money at the same time, spread peace. I feel empty if you don't include Gen Z. Better change the world, so y'all better get ready. Misty Crypto, I'm never backing down. I got a wax account, you should check it out. So many NFTs, I think I lost count, and I'm only getting started. Yeah, I'm barely off the ground. Listing crypto, you cannot stop me. My hands are made from diamonds, your hands fall like origami. Never be the boss of me. Bitcoin's all I need. When I say I'm zesty, that's just me talking honestly. Crypto and yum bomb marketplace. I wanna see the more. We gotta go through cyberspace. Leave this world without a trace. Say pay for a different day, 'cause we partners in the cryptos didn't stay.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Miss Teen Crypto Show. I hope you guys are having a lovely day today. I know I am. If you guys are in the chat right now and you're feeling the zest, drop those 100 emojis in the chat. If you're new to the channel, what's up? My name is Miss Teen Crypto. It's nice to meet you. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and share out this stream with friends if you want more people to see this and feel the zesty vibe. As always, before we jump into the show, I'm going to thank 3 amazing sponsors of the Miss Teen Crypto Show. First, Wax Blockchain, absolutely killing the game. Gas-free NFTs. That's what we need right now. Gas is so expensive. If you are looking to trade and earn, yes, I said trade and earn, Wax NFTs, niftyblocks.com is the spot. Lastly, Ballet. Ballet is absolutely killing it. If you're looking for a nice Father's Day gift, might I suggest the Ballet wallet, balletcrypto.com. We will be giving away one of these today. Our zesty guest will give a keyword in the chat for you guys to enter in order to win one of these. If you do win, please send me a DM, on Twitter with your email address, and I will send that over to the Ballet team and get you started. I see we have 8 likes right now. If we get 15, I'll drop another free NFT. And let's jump into today's zesty guest, the one and only Mark Moss. Welcome to the show. How are you?
That's right. One Mark Moss. That's my title. I'm doing great. Good to be here with you today.
I'm happy to have you. You have a very nice background. Is that a green screen behind you, or is that legit?
No, it's a real background. Yeah.
Wow.
I moved into a new studio a couple months ago, and I was building out a whole set, and it's been delayed. So I kind of it's just a temporary set. So I'm glad you like it. It's going to get better.
Absolutely. That's actually amazing. I have a green screen. That's the best I got. But hopefully one day I could be a cool kid like you. And speaking of being a cool kid, you have done so much in this space. I admire you, Sir Mark Moss, and I really wanted to have you on the show to learn more about you and hopefully have your community learn more about you as well. Do you mind sharing how you found finance or how you found cryptocurrency? When did this journey start for you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go through it really quick and we can dig in a little bit if you want. But right out of high school, I started buying bank-owned repos from the houses from the bank. So at the time, the banks were sitting on tons of houses. They had gone through this bear crash, and I was able to buy houses 0 down. They just wanted to get rid of them. If you could just take them off their hands and fix them up, they'd give them to you. And so started doing that. And so kind of just jumped right into being this investor. Didn't really know much about much at the time, but figured that out. That was in like the mid 90s. And then at the late 90s, I started investing into these like crazy things that nobody knew anything about. My roommate quit his job, was day trading, and we're trading these things called internet stocks. Nobody knew what those things were at the time. And
wow.
My roommate quit his job and trading these things. And we're talking about these weird like internet companies that nobody knew what they were. Very similar to the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so kind of rode that up through the dotcom boom and saw that boom. And then I saw the bust that came after that. 2000 was the famous dotcom bust. I had this great idea that I should start an internet company at the bottom of that crash in 2001. And so I did. And at that time, to give people some perspective that don't know how it was back then, there was no Shopify, there was no WordPress. Like if you wanted to build a website, it was very difficult. If you wanted to build an e-commerce store, it was even more difficult. So I spent a lot of money hiring someone to build this e-commerce store. And I went to these brands. I said, hey, I built this website. I want to sell your products on my website. And they laughed at me and they said, no one would ever buy anything online. That's ridiculous.
Wow.
And I said, well, I beg to differ, and I spent a bunch of money on this website, and I'll buy your products. I'll give you the money. And they said, we don't even want our stuff being sold online. So
What?
yeah, I mean, it's crazy to look back on that now. I say that for some perspective, because all the people that say, Bitcoin is never going to be anything. It's like, well, I've heard that story before, right? I've been there, done that.
Wow.
So started a tech company, built that up pretty well. At the time, it was very difficult. There was no one online to advertise to. So I was running ads in magazines. At the time, it was still mail order. You had to literally cut out a piece of the magazine and mail it in with a check. That's how it was done before e-commerce.
Whoa.
And built that up, had a Fortune 500 exit with that. And I've basically been online, marketing and investing in businesses ever since. Been through a couple bear crashes. I did really well with business, built up a huge real estate portfolio, sold a couple businesses. 2008, great financial crash came around and caught me off guard and pretty much wiped me out. And so that was kind of the big wake up call for me, where I was pretty good at business and making money. I had done really well, making a lot of money. I thought I was really good with it. I was, but there was this financial system that I didn't know anything about. And it seemed to have a crazy effect and control over my life. And so how did something I know nothing about have so much control? I know how to make money. That was good, but there's these outside forces. And so it was, unfortunately, it was a big smack across the face. Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so that was my punch in the face moment. And I'm like, shoot, I guess I got to go figure out what this whole financial casino is about. And so for the last dozen years or 14 years, I've just been studying the financial system. So I became a gold bug. And I realized the whole problem was this fiat money system that we have. And all these booms and busts are because of the Federal Reserve printing money, creating money, increasing the money supply, shrinking the money supply, increasing the money supply, shrinking the money supply, boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust, which causes people to make money and then lose it all, give it all back to the house. So I started learning about that. I became a gold bug. I became as I became more of a gold bug, I became very, I guess it was probably part of my upbringing as well, but just very freedom focused. I've always been very freedom focused. It's one of my highest values. And I got pretty disillusioned with politics and just figured there's nothing we can do to change that system. And I had been watching Bitcoin, 2012, 2013, I seen it running up to, $1,000. It was like catching my eye. Maybe I should buy it. And then it just crashed from 1,000 all the way back down. I'm like, oh, never mind. Kind of put that on hold. In 2015, I was in the process of setting up a Panama corporation, Panama bank account. And my goal was to get money out of the US banking system, because I thought, I don't trust my money in the US banks. They could seize it. They could crash. They're still insolvent technically. So I want to put some outside of this banking system, outside the reach of the government. And I took another look at Bitcoin and I said, you know what, that's the same thing. It's a way for me to get my money out of the financial system, a way for me to get it out of their control, away from manipulation, and where they can't seize it. And so I started buying Bitcoin in 2015. It was about $300. Wow. Once I started putting money in, like most people, you get a little skin in the game. Then you're like, well, shoot, what is this that I'm buying? Start looking at it, start researching to understand it more. And it just dawned on me. It's like, well, finally we have a tool that we can win. We finally have a way we can win. And so I'm like, well, I got to tell the whole world about it. So I started screaming it from the mountaintops, which led to me writing a cryptocurrency research newsletter from 2016 to 2019. I personally researched and published over 1,000 pages of research on every crypto project that was around during that period. And I've been talking about it ever since. YouTube, podcast, radio show. I spoke at the Bitcoin conference, and anyone that will listen to me.
Wow, Mark, you've had the journey of journeys. Coming out of high school, you started investing. So were you in college, or did you just took the deep dive?
Skip college. Who needs that?
Wow. What was that like for you? Because I went through something similar. I chose to go full-time crypto for the time being. How did you take that leap? Were your parents okay with that? Did you receive backlash and truly following what you wanted to do?
No, my parents weren't okay with it. So I remember, it's hard for me to remember. I thought I would just go to college. I thought I'd just go the traditional path like most people. I wanted to go out of state to college. I wanted to go to Colorado. I'm from California. I'm a surfer, but I wanted to go to Colorado because I wanted to snowboard. And I had some friends going there. And kind of at the last minute, my parents are like, look, we can't afford to send you there. I came from a very blue collar family. My parents are like, we can't afford to send you out of state and do that. And so I was like, okay, then I'm just going to quit and I won't go to school and I'll just start working full time. And I remember my parents were like, no, you can't do that. Specifically, my mom was like, no, you have to go. You have to go. And
Yeah.
I said, you know what, I'm just going to take a year off. I'll take a year off and work. And then, I'll come back to it. And she said, no, you won't. Once you start making money, you'll never want to go back to school. And she like begged me, please just go to the local community college. So she got me to go and take like the placement test, like the matriculation test. Mm-hmm. And I remember I went to the college and I sat down in the classroom with a bunch of other people and I'm sitting there taking this test. And like halfway through the test, I just got up and I just walked out of the class. And so I never went back. And, I guess my parents are okay with it today.
I mean, they must be. Were you like thrown out of the house? Were you on your own at that point? Well, like, how did your journey begin?
I mean, I came from a really good family. So I came from a very blue collar family. I wasn't given a silver spoon by any means, but what I did have is I did have a good family. So I do have good parents and they do love me. So I have that going for me. But I knew I wanted to be on my own. Like I said, freedom is my highest value. And it's very important for people to figure out what their core values are, which a lot of people are like, oh yeah, freedom's my value too, but it's not everybody. So some people want consistency or some people want security, right? So I knew that was my highest value. And so I graduated when I was 17. Just the way that my birthday works. And I literally moved out like 2 weeks later when I was 17 and just started working full time and I was just on my own and I have been ever since.
What was your first job?
So I started working for my dad doing construction when I was like 10 years old. So I got to spend all the summers when all my friends were playing, I got to go do construction with my dad. I hated it, but it gave me good work ethic. So looking backwards on it, I guess it worked out pretty well for me. But I never really had any other job. And when I was a senior in high school, just a few months away from graduating, my friend's like, hey, do you want to work with me at my dad's company? I'm like, what is it? He's like, oh, it's like an engineering company. They design things. And there's only a couple people there. I'm like, what are we going to do? He's like, well, we're going to sweep the floors and take out the trash. I'm like, okay, sure. So I started working there part-time after school, and it was like four or five people working there. There was no job application. There was no nothing. I just started working there easy. And then right as I graduated, I just started working there full time. And that was the only job I've ever had in my life. So I've never technically filled out a job application. I've never put out a resume, and that's the only job I've ever had. I worked there. I quit there in I think it was like 5 years later, I quit and started my own business and just never went back.
I know you said you were investing during that time as well. How did you build up your capital and how did you like decide on what to spend it on? Because I know like a lot of kids coming out of high school, they don't really have a lot of capital. A lot of kids I know still don't even work and they're like 19 years old. So how did you build that capital and allocate it properly?
Yeah, so I was working, right? So I was working a little bit, but the reality is there's a couple things. So there's the old saying, it takes money to make money.
Exactly.
Which it does, but it doesn't take your money.
Ooh, spice.
So OPM, right? Other people's money. And so OPM, other people's money, OPT, other people's time, like learn to leverage other resources. And so if you have a good idea, there's always money out there. And so at this point, like I said, at this point, the bank had so many properties, they were willing to just give them zero down. Just take them. And so I was able to buy a house at zero down. It was an $80,000 duplex. And I bought it zero down, but I needed $3,000 for the closing costs, which I didn't even have. So I took on a partner and we split it. It was $1,500 each for the closing costs. But then we had to fix it up. So then we took out like a couple credit cards. I got some like Home Depot credit cards and we did most of the work ourselves. And so I was working full time. I'd work all day, then I'd go to my property, work all night and every weekend. I did that for 6 months. But at the end of 6 months, I made $30,000, which was more than I could make in a year at my job. And so I was off to the races at that point.
Wow, that's a real dedication. Really, like a good work ethic.
The one thing I would like to just maybe put a little emphasis on in that, this is a big thing, investing, the lines between business owner and investor get very blurred. So over the next decade, I went to fix and flip over 100 houses. So was I a real estate investor or was that my business? So those lines get very blurred. The other thing that I want to point to is that I was creating value. And this is a big thing for me. So I was buying these banks were letting me buy these houses that were destroyed. When a house is repossessed, it typically gets thrashed by the person leaving it. And a lot of times the floors were ripped out, the kitchens were destroyed, the bathrooms, et cetera. And you can't get a loan on a house that doesn't have a floor or it doesn't have a kitchen. So these banks had these houses that they really couldn't sell because they were thrashed. Someone had to buy them, fix them up in order for someone else to be able to buy them with a loan. And so we were buying these destroyed houses and we were adding value to them. And then we were able to sell them. And it's a key piece because in today's day and age where we have record amount of job quits because people want to quit their jobs to trade options on Robinhood or trade cryptocurrencies or whatever, that's not investing. There's no value being added to that. All you're doing is speculating. You're just gambling. You're hoping that what you're buying today will be worth more something in the future versus like in that real estate scenario, I was buying it for 80,000, but I knew if it was all fixed up, it'd be worth 150.
Exactly.
And if I put in 10,000 or 20,000, it would be worth 150. So I was adding the value. I was providing a good and a service that was needed in the marketplace, and I made the money for that versus buying options on Robinhood. It's a little bit different today.
Absolutely. Adding value, that's such a key component because, yes, a lot of people are coming into this space just to trade crypto, and that's very difficult on its own. But how do you feel that, like, you yourself have added value to the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space? And definitely talk more about your content. I'm going to try to drop links as you're going.
Well, I think, when it comes to that, I think, in the beginning, I wrote that cryptocurrency newsletter. I suppose by doing all that research, by spending hundreds or thousands of hours with myself and a team and doing the research and deciphering it down and putting it together in easy to form content, I was providing value to the people who were receiving that information.
Absolutely.
So I was providing value to them. By trading an option, by trading a stock, by trading a crypto, there's no value being provided there. So if I buy it from you for $2 and then I sell it to this guy for $3, I made $1, but there was no value that was added into that exchange, right? So the one thing that I always keep in mind, and this is an important piece, is that there's 3 ways that everyone should always be focused on money. And the first way often gets overlooked with people jumping in, hoping to get rich, these record amount of job quits as I'm talking about. So the first thing is you have to think about wealth creation. I have to create wealth, and you create wealth by adding value. Then the second thing is once you've created that wealth, you want your wealth to accumulate more wealth for you, make money. So that's step number 2, that's investing. And then step number 3 is how do I preserve that wealth? Wealth preservation, wealth creation, wealth accumulation, and wealth preservation. And so you take like some of the best known investors in the world, take Warren Buffett, for example, or take Ray Dalio, for example. Those are some of the best well-known, most successful investors in the world today, but they both still go to work every single day.
They do.
They have businesses. Warren Buffett has a business called Berkshire Hathaway. Ray Dalio has a business called Bridgewater Capital. And so they still go to work every day, even though they're investors. So a lot of times people go, I'm going to quit my job. We saw a record amount of job quits to become a full-time investor, but that's not how it works. We should be creating value, and then we should take that money that we make and then invest that money. So for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, just go read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad and look at the cash flow quadrant to understand how that works. But you take your money from the business and you put it into the I quadrant, which is the investing quadrant.
And, I know we were talking about, the dot-com boom and all the things in that type of area. How did you feel entering the internet at that time? And how do you think it might compare to right now your evangelism in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Well, a couple of things that were interesting at that time. So one, I was so young, I didn't really have this historical perspective. Today, I'm a big student of history because I'm trying to understand. Like we're going into gas rationing right now. They're projecting that we'll have gas rationing in the US right now.
That's crazy.
That doesn't seem like it happened, but it did happen. It happened in the 70s. Now, I don't remember that, but I'm studying history to find out about that. There's a good chance we have food rationing this year in the United States, which is crazy. But that can't happen, right? Well, it did in the 40s, and the US literally rationed food for people. So I love to go study history to gain that perspective because we think things can't happen, but they do. So at that time, I was young. I didn't have the historical perspective. So I didn't really grasp what was going on at the time like I do now. But some parallels were Well, one, the internet grew much slower because there was no internet.
Exactly. It was the very beginning.
The internet grew slow because there was no internet. How did you find out about these things? Now, in order to trade an internet stock at the time, you had to call a broker on the phone. There was no internet to do a trade with. There was no E-Trade. There was no Robinhood. So that was something. But one thing that I look backwards on with this perspective is that while we were trading these things called internet stocks, and there was little groups of us talking about all these internet stocks, and most people had no idea what we were talking about. Within a few years, and today, there's no such thing as internet stocks.
Yeah,
they're just companies. They're just companies.
True.
And so everyone's like crypto, 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 crypto. But my guess is within another year or two, there's no such thing as crypto. They're just companies. I mean, I'm not saying there's no such thing as crypto. There's still internet, right?
Yeah.
My point is there was these niches built around internet stocks. And today there's no niche around internet stocks. I mean, most of them are listed on the NASDAQ. So you could talk about the NASDAQ, I suppose, but right, they're just the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, they're just companies. And so we talk about crypto, crypto, crypto. And my guess is crypto just kind of goes away. Not that it goes away, but it's not like this category like internet stocks were.
Yeah, it's more prominent as in like just stuff we use every day.
They just become companies. And we talk about them individually as opposed to like this little sector that nobody knows about kind of a thing.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. I've been trying to like articulate that in a nice way, but that's definitely a great way of putting it because yeah, like we're going to be using crypto all the time. Like, you know, it's not going to like people talk about Bitcoin as if it's something like so crazy. It's just digital cash. And like people kind of overcomplicate it a little bit.
Well, I would push back on that a little bit.
Ooh, push.
So what happens is we have new technologies and then we have technological revolutions. They're different. So a new technology is something that's an improvement offer. It improves on something that we already have and it extends markets. So take the iPhone, for example. That's a new technology. That's great. It took a computer and it took a phone and it put them together. Cool. Took two things we had, put them together, made them a little bit better. That's a new technology. And that's great. It makes people a lot of money and it's very useful. A technological revolution is different. A technological revolution has two main characteristics. One, it changes the course of humanity. And two, it drives financial markets. Now that's pretty major. They happen on about a 40 to 60 year time frame, approximately every 50 years. There's been 5. Only 5. We had the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s. For all of humanity, people had to dig holes with their hand, and now we had machines. It's a big deal. Then we had steam engines and railways. All of humanity, we had horsepower, manpower. Now we had steam engines that could move stuff across continents. It was a big deal. Then we had electricity and steel. I don't have to tell you how big of a shift in humanity electricity created. Then we had oil, automobiles, and mass production, 1908. 1971, we had the invention of the microprocessor, which brought us telecommunications, brought us the internet, and then enables us to do that here. 1971 plus 50 years puts us right about today, 2021, 2022. And there's another technological revolution happening. And so Bitcoin is like digital cash, sure, but it's a technological revolution. It's something that's going to change the course of humanity and drive financial markets. Let me unpack that a little bit. So if you look, I listed the 5. So what's driven the financial markets over the last 50 years? Telecom, internet. What drove the markets before that? GE, GM. What drove the markets before that? Steel, oil. You see the trend here?
Yes.
The other thing is that, like I said, it changes the course of humanity. But what happens is because as humans, we're not good at imagining the future. And so when we get something new, we try to compare it to something else that we know. I mean, if you were trying to explain something to somebody, you're like, well, it's sort of like this, or it's sort of like that. So they could try to get a grasp of that. I've often thought like, how hard would it be to like describe something to a blind person? They've never seen anything before. So it'd be very difficult. So we try to like compare it to something we know. So for example, I wasn't there alive, none of us were, but I would imagine when electricity was invented, what was the first application of electricity, the app? The first app of electricity was a light bulb. So at the time, we'd say, well, what is this electricity thing? Oh, well, it's sort of like a digital candle. Well, what the heck do I need that for? Candles have been light for 5,000 years. And look, a candle is way better. It's like portable. I can carry it around. I don't even need all these stupid wires. So electricity was like a digital candle. It was that, but it became so much more. Okay. We can say the same thing about the internet, which wasn't a technological revolution. It was part of a revolution. But the internet, when it first came out, I was there in the early days. What is this internet thing? Well, it's sort of a way we can send electronic messages, and we can have like these digital message boards. And maybe in the early 90s, we thought maybe one day we could even buy stuff like online. Okay. So that's what it was. What was the internet? It's like these digital message boards, a way to send electronic messages. That's what it was at the time.
Yeah.
We didn't know that our cars would be hooked to something called a cloud, using something called social media to like navigate us around traffic, right? So the internet has become so much more than just a way to send electronic messages. The email was the killer app, the first application of the internet. But now the internet does so much more.
Exactly.
And so when you say Bitcoin, what is the killer application of Bitcoin? It's like digital cash. It's like digital gold. It is that. You're absolutely right. It is that, but it will become so much more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what do you envision this grand, idea? How do you envision that?
So when you study technology, when you study these technological revolutions, you can see that they all work, they all unfold very similar. A couple things happen. So let's not go too far back. Let's just go to the automobile, 1908. So this new invention was this car. Wow, how cool is that? It's the hottest thing going. Venture capitalists come in, investors, they want to make a bunch of money. And very quickly, there was 250 automobile manufacturers. But there was two problems. One, there was no market. Who was going to buy all those cars from 250 manufacturers? Two, there was no infrastructure. There was no roads. There was no gas stations. There was no service stations. So they all went bankrupt. They all went out of business. Three remained: Ford, Chrysler, GM. And then it grew. And of course, today there's 250 automobile manufacturers or more. The internet was very similar, right? So the internet started in the late 90s. We had this dot-com boom. And by 1999, 2000, we had a dot-com for everything. We had webvan.com and pets.com and all these things. The same two problems were there. There was no market and there's no infrastructure. So by the year 2000, less than 10% of people had ever bought anything online.
Wow.
So while the biggest thing was getting your groceries delivered or buying pet food, nobody was doing that. So they were good ideas, but being early is the same as being wrong. So they went out of business and there was no infrastructure. The internet was too slow. We didn't get the iPhone until 2007.
Yeah.
So there was no one using it, and it was too slow to be used that way. So those were good ideas, but they were too early and they all went away. And eventually they came back. The other thing that's important to understand is understanding how that works. But the other thing to understand is that what happens with new technologies is people try to rush out and do way too much too soon. But again, no market and no infrastructure. And without that infrastructure, they can't build it the right way. And so that causes a lot of malinvestment, bad investment. So if we look back to the internet boom, for example, all these big publicly traded companies, they said, we can't trust our data on this open internet. We have to build our own private intranets. And billions of dollars were spent by these companies to build private intranets, their own internet, because they couldn't trust the big internet. They needed to build their own. Today, where is all that? It's all gone. It's all worth zero. Billions of dollars were wasted.
Yeah.
Because today, everything's built on one single internet.
Exactly.
The other thing to understand is that technology scales in layers, right? So you have the internet is a stack. So it starts with fibers in the ground, and then there's switching boxes, right? And then there's a protocol that works. And so we have a protocol called TCP/IP. If you've ever set up your router at home, you've set up an IP address. So that's a transfer protocol that transfers packets of information, which right now we're sending packets of information back and forth to each other, right? And so we have that protocol. And then we wanted email. So then let's add SMTP on top of the ITP protocol. And then we wanted security for websites. So then we have HTTPS. And so we add these things on layers, sort of like the financial system. We had gold, and then we had paper certificates of gold. Then we had checks. Then we have credit cards, and we add layers. So there's one protocol, TCP/IP. And on top of that protocol, we have trillions of applications, trillions.
Yes.
My personal website, Zoom that we're using here, YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, they're all different, but they all work on one protocol.
Yeah.
Now, does that make me a TCP/IP protocol maximalist?
I mean, no.
No, that's just how it works. And the reason why is what happens is in order for progress, you need to have, in order to have progress, you need to have the most attempts possible. And the more basic the protocol layer is, then the more options we can build on top of it. And we never want that protocol to change ever. Because imagine if somebody controlled that TCP/IP protocol and they went and changed it today. What would happen to those trillions of websites, trillions of dollars?
The internet would fall apart.
Would fall apart, right? So you can't go change it. So you need that protocol to be pretty basic. All the change happens on top. So Netflix and Facebook are different, but they use the same application, and nobody changes that application. It's immutable, right? So if we look back today, I would draw parallels of cryptocurrencies and internet. We've already talked about some of them, but some of them are that we've seen the same thing. So we had this influx of investors coming in. So the moment for internet was in 1995. 1995 was the first IPO. It was Netscape. Netscape was a browser that's not even around anymore. But what happened is it had this giant IPO. And so it brought all this money in. So from 1995 to 2000, all these IPO, all this money came in, sort of like the ICO craze that we had in crypto, right? And so what happens is all these ICOs are going to go build all these websites. But again, just like the automobiles, just like internet, there's no market. Nobody's there to use them. And two, the infrastructure is not fully built out. Okay. And so what happens is all these ideas that are being done on crypto, there's probably a lot of good ideas, but just like the webvan.com and the pets.com, it's too early. There's no infrastructure. There's no market yet. And just like all these intranets, again, trying to solve a problem too soon rather than waiting for the market infrastructure to come around. And so what I see is a lot of that malinvestment has been done.
Yeah.
We have people rushing to create new applications, but instead of waiting to build it on the protocol, they're trying to build their own protocols, these intranets, if you will. And so what we're seeing now is that Bitcoin has progressed so fast. It's getting faster and faster. And so with layer 2, layer 3, like Lightning, for example, I know we were both at the Bitcoin conference. They introduced another upgrade called Taro, another layer. And so now on Bitcoin, using layer 2, layer 3, sort of like the internet uses layer 2, layer 3, like the financial system uses layer 2, layer 3. On Bitcoin now, we can use layer 2, layer 3. We can send Bitcoin faster, cheaper, and more private than any other cryptocurrency. So anyone that offers to do it faster, cheaper, or more private, okay, we don't need that anymore. Now with the Taro upgrade, now we can create new tokens on top of Bitcoin. We can do smart contracts on top of Bitcoin. And so now any of the 20,000 cryptocurrencies, it can all be done on top of Bitcoin. And so we go back to this internet type deal where those intranets weren't really needed. Everything eventually just came back to be built on one protocol. And if TCP/IP is a protocol that transfers packets of information, Bitcoin is a protocol that transfers packets of value. And there can, just like the internet, there can be trillions of applications built on top of it. But how many protocols do we need? And so that's kind of my thesis. That's kind of how I see things shaping up. So pushing back on that a little bit.
I see, Sir Mark. I mean, I see where you're coming from. Definitely. Do you think that, because, people are interested in NFTs and they serve a huge purpose in many different ways. You picture NFTs, basically all transfers being on top of Bitcoin's blockchain only?
Well, so there's a couple things there. So first of all, this is a contrarian take for probably a lot of people. Back to a revolution. So there's a technological revolution. That revolution is decentralization.
Yes.
That's the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So we're tired of all these centralized entities that corrupt and manipulate. Decentralization is the revolution. But not everything needs to be decentralized.
Like what do you feel should not be decentralized?
Well, money needs to be decentralized.
Absolutely.
Nobody should have the authority to control the supply of money, create money artificially, manipulate it, steal it, seize it. Nobody should have the control. It's not about taking it from one group of people, give it to another. It's about nobody having control. So that for sure needs to happen. We need to have censorship resistant technologies so you and I can communicate and nobody could stop it, block it, or prevent it. So that needs to be decentralized. DeFi? I don't think DeFi. I don't think finance needs to be decentralized. Depends on what you consider finance. So obviously I'm talking about the control of money, my ability to hold it, send it to you. That's finance. That should be decentralized. But when it comes to loans, I'm an investor. I'm a real estate investor. I give loans. I invest in deals. People give me loans. I would never, and nobody watching this should ever loan money to somebody that they don't know and can't judge the risk on will they be able to pay them back or not. Nobody should ever do that. Yeah. Somebody has to make that decision. Now, I've bought a couple of real estate projects over the last year. I got really good financing because I have good credit. And I needed a centralized entity to look at my ability to repay, judge my credit worthiness, and give me a different rate than they may give somebody else. That doesn't need to be decentralized. That needs to be centralized. So that's a big one. And other things. So, if you take the word blockchain, what is a blockchain? A blockchain is a very slow, inefficient database. That's what it is. Now, why would I want a slow, inefficient database? It actually goes back to Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum. He put together something known as the trilemma. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So a dilemma means in order to get more of one, I have to get less of another. A trilemma means there's three. To get more of one, I have to give up. And so he drew out the trilemma, which is speed, security, and decentralization. So in 2017, in Bitcoin, there was the block size wars. And every other cryptocurrency has done this. In order to get more speed on the main chain, I have to give up decentralization. So Bitcoin Cash forked off of Bitcoin and they said, we're going to make the block sizes bigger. There's a great book written, The Block Size Wars. It's a good read. We're going to make the block sizes bigger so we can have more throughput on the main chain. In order to do that, we sacrificed decentralization. But what's the revolution here? The revolution is gives me the decentralization that I want, if that makes sense. So I think video games. Do video games need to be decentralized? Like they need to be censorship resistant for all of humanity? Like why?
I mean, having ownerships of your assets. I mean, this is just my opinion. Actually having ownerships of your assets and being able to trade those avatars or things you're earning for real world value, that's pretty significant. Did I lose you? Oh no. Guys, apologies. I don't know what's going on here.
There for a minute. You back?
Yeah, I'm good. Are you good?
Yeah, I think it's my internet froze up. But I heard you say that owning assets, you should be able to own your assets in a censorship resistant way. And I agree 100%. I don't disagree with you on that at all.
Yeah, like if I'm, in the past, like Fortnite, like I could spend $100 using my mom's credit card or something and go buy all of these avatars and earn all these tokens, but I can't exchange those for real world value, which is what you can do with NFTs. You can work hard, grind in these games, and if you have something rare, you could trade it off, sell it for something for real world value. I think that's pretty significant.
I don't disagree at all. I agree with you. So let's think about that for a minute. So like I have a stock, I buy Tesla stock, right? Yeah. And I buy it through E-Trade or Charles Schwab. I buy it through my broker. Well, technically I don't own the E-Trade stock. I'm sorry, the Tesla stock. Technically E-Trade owes it to me. Now this is a big difference. So I don't really have custody. Like in my E-Trade account, they say I have Tesla stock. I don't really have it. They say they owe it to me, but they don't even have it. It's owed to them.
Yeah.
And they don't even have it. It's owed to them. And there's about 6 people in the middle between me and Tesla. Now, in the old days, I had a piece of paper that said, this is my Tesla stock, and you and I could meet at a coffee shop and I could sell you my Tesla stock. So I had custody of the asset, and you and I could conduct trades. But today that's all messed up where there's 6 people in the middle and nobody really owns it. That's a messed up system.
Absolutely.
And we should be able to have custody of that asset and trade it. Now, maybe the same with a video game. So let's talk about the video game. So the video game, I've worked my butt off in Fortnite. I've earned, Fortnite bucks or I bought skins for a gun or whatever. And I should be able to hold that asset, right? And we should be able to trade that. And I agree. But let's just use that stock for an example, or a share of a piece of real estate. So I take a piece of real estate and I break it down to a bunch of shares, and people could own a token that represents ownership, and I have custody. No one could steal it, right? So I think what we're both agreeing on is that we should be able to have assets that we can custody ourselves that no one could steal or censor if we wanted to transfer them. That's what we agree on, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So whether it's a stock or a share of a real estate project or whatever, we both want that. But if that's what we want, and we want it to be immutable so no one could delete it or roll it back, and we want it to be censorship resistant so nobody can block it, the only way we can achieve that is by having decentralization. And let's unpack what decentralization means for a second. So centralization means like Facebook has one database, Amazon runs one database, Experian runs one database. It's a centralized database. Decentralization means instead of one database, there's thousands or millions of databases. And all these databases need to be decentralized so nobody can control them, and then they reach consensus. Over half of them have to agree. And so back to that block size war in 2017, Bitcoin decided to keep the block sizes very small. And the reason why that's important is that the entire Bitcoin database is about 300 gigabytes. So anybody anywhere in the world could take like a 5-year-old laptop and download an entire copy of the database and run a node. And because of that, people do. So people in Africa, people in South America, they can run a full Bitcoin node. It stays decentralized. But how can you run a node for Ethereum or Solana or Cardano? And the answer is you can't. And so they're run by commercial grade servers and commercial grade location facilities, which leads to centralization. And so I agree with you. We should have all these assets for my video games, for my stock, for my real estate. We should have all those assets where we have custody of them. But in order to keep that immutable, censorship resistant, it needs to have decentralization.
Yeah. I got you. I do feel that Litecoin has those properties as well that you're talking about. But let's just give away our Ballet wallet. Do you have a key phrase or a word you would like our friends in the chat to enter in order to win one of these?
How about disruptor?
Ooh, disruptor. I really like that. Disruptor. Okay, friends. So if you guys are in the chat, enter disruptor in order to enter to win a Zesty Ballet wallet. All right, let me just put that in the chat. Enter disruptor to win. Okay, friends, keep entering that in the chat. I see so many friends here today. Thank you for everyone that came out. So entering, what you said, you came into Bitcoin when it was $300. That's extremely, extremely early. What was it like to buy Bitcoin at that time? Were you local Bitcoining?
No, I think I just bought it off of Coinbase at the time.
Ooh.
And it was extremely early, but what was it like? So I would say, and this is going to catch some people off guard, I would say that today you have a better risk-adjusted entry into Bitcoin today than I did in 2015 at $300. And the reason why is because I said risk adjusted. So in 2015, it was so risky.
Yeah.
We didn't know what this thing was. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if they were going to make it illegal. We didn't know if it would survive. We didn't know if other cryptocurrencies would take it over. We didn't know any of that. And so it was very, very risky. So I could only allocate a little bit of money towards it. Whereas today, I feel like almost all the risk has gone, but we still have all this massive upside potential. So it was super risky. There wasn't a lot of information about it at the time. I wish that the amount of money I allocated towards Bitcoin in last year, 2021, if I would have put that much in back in 2015, it'd be a whole different story.
A whole different story.
It was just so risky back then. Yeah.
And what was it like to talk about Bitcoin at that time? Especially like, you obviously went through like the 2017 crisis we had. So what was that like? I mean, just like going through all of that, trying to stay in your conviction.
Yeah, so I benefited from 2015 to 2017 was just a bull run in all cryptocurrency, and as I said, I launched this cryptocurrency research newsletter in 2016. So I was putting out pumping out 25, 50 pages of research a month on every crypto project, decentralized exchange, privacy coins, layer one smart contract protocols, etc. And it seemed like that you could almost like throw a dart at the board and like everything went up, which it did. I think in the year 2017, there was like 24 coins that went up more than 1,000%. And there was only, going backwards, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 coins versus today, there's like 20,000. So there was a lot less to keep track of. So it was much easier. I felt like I pretty much knew every project that was out back then, because again, there was like 2,000 of them. So it was much smaller. I think that the ecosystem is still pretty accessible today, but I think back then it was much smaller. So anybody you wanted to talk to, you could just talk to them because it was just so small. It was small, it was friendly. But again, like we didn't know what was going to happen. And so, I was writing this cryptocurrency research newsletter, and I was thinking that, it's not Bitcoin that's the revolution, it's blockchain technology. And, we didn't know who was going to win at the time. So it was still kind of, in my mind back then, it was still open. There was still a lot of stuff to be discovered. It was still very risky. It was fun. It was exciting. Like I said, it was a very close-knit community. And then, of course, like I said, 15, 16, 17, it was just like straight up, which, of course, when everyone's making money, it's pretty fun. But then after 2017, then we had the big crash, right? So December 2017. And 2018, 2019 were tough. It was really tough. And I remember seeing my portfolio enough to like never have to work again, go down to like, 6 digits, well below the 7-figure number. Right. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? Like, no, like I could have just cashed it out. I could have just been done. And like, now it's basically worth, hardly anything. And that was tough.
It was another Mike Tyson punch.
Yeah, and I've been through enough of those, but it was like, you have your doubts, like, will it ever come back? I mean, it's still so new, like, could it come back? And so there was a lot of doubts. And then it just seemed for 2 years, just kept getting lower and lower and lower. And then it would finally start to come back up, and then it would get smacked down again. It was tough. I remember, I've been making YouTube videos since I started my channel in 2018. And I remember like in 2019, like there was nothing going on. There was like nothing to even talk about. And there's this quote from Lenin that says, there's decades where nothing seems to happen, and there's days where decades seem to happen. And so I was like, what am I even going to talk about this week? And I started talking about like business and like personal development or whatever. Whereas today there's so much going on. There's no shortage of stuff
every single day. Every single day.
Yeah, every single day. There's so much to talk about. And then I think, the one thing that helped me get through that bear market, which, maybe looks like we're in another winter bear market here. I'd say one thing that really helped me with that is that I think, having this perspective, being punched in the face before, but really you need to understand what you're buying and why you're buying it. And then let me give you an analogy. So being a real estate investor for a long time, I could go down to like my local city hall tonight. Let's say they're having a meeting, and they have this meeting. They said, hey, outside of town, about 30, 40 minutes out of town, out this empty, deserted area, in 5 years from now, we're going to build a new football stadium. And I'm like, dang. So the next morning I run out there and I buy up some land, because I know once that football stadium gets built,
flood of
all that
people.
stuff, that land's going to be worth a lot of money.
Oh,
right?
heck yeah.
So I bought it off of a thesis. I believed that in 5 years, a stadium would be built and that land be worth more. And so I'm going to buy land, because once that's built, that land will be worth more. So that's my thesis. That's why I bought it. Let's say that next year, I find out that land next to my lot is actually cheaper than what I paid. What should I do? Should I freak out? Should I sell my land? Oh my gosh. Or should I buy more?
Ooh.
Well, it depends. The question is, why did I buy it? What's my thesis? Well, if I bought it because they're building this football stadium, then is that still true? So are they still working on the plans? Have they got the permits? Do they have financing in place? Have they broken ground? As long as that thesis is still on track, then I would stay in that position. And if land went up for sale cheaper than mine, I would buy the dip because my thesis was still on track. Now, if I dug in and found out, oh, shoot, they discovered nuclear waste on the land, they can never build there again. Well, then I better take a loss and just sell that as fast as I can.
Yeah. It could kind of turn into this DGen type mentality if you're thinking about it that way. Like, oh, my property next door, like that's a lot on the mind. I mean, especially with real estate, like we're talking about like real properties and did you ever have that type of I guess situation where you saw that there was something really good coming along, so you wanted to grab some property near that?
I've never had that exact scenario
Because I
play
was
out.
gonna say that's pretty cool.
But I was just attaching it back to, the crypto winter, if we're in it, right? So how did I deal with it in 2018 and 2019? Well, I just kind of zoomed out and said, why did I buy this asset? Do I think this thesis still plays out? Do I believe that, Bitcoin will become this big reserve asset at some point? Do I think that this, whatever project you bought, why did I buy this project? And is that still in play? And if it is, then the answer is you just continue to hold. But you always need to be checking that. And if for something changed in that thesis, then you want to just take a loss and just get rid of it as fast as you can.
Amen. Okay. So K9MM, my bad. Welcome to the show. I know you've been watching for a little bit. You have won the ballet giveaway, so definitely send me a DM on Twitter, my friend. If we get a few more likes, I'll drop another NFT as well. Sir Mark, what do you feel about the state of the market right now with crypto, Bitcoin? I've seen, it's so funny. I check the news sometimes and they're like, crypto crashed, the crumble, it's dead, we're done for. How do you feel?
Well, again, having gone through it a couple of times, I mean, I've gone through a couple of drawdowns of 80% at this point.
Yeah,
so
very dramatic.
So I've lived through it. And for me, I go back and I check my thesis. For me, it seems, as I said, it's a better risk-adjusted entry today than in 2015, even though it was way cheaper back then, because at then it was so risky. At this point, it's like almost inevitable. So for me and the assets I own, the thesis is still in play. And so I shrug it off and I'm just going to continue to hold.
And how do you feel that adoption is going to continue to progress? Because I feel that no matter what the price is of the market, Bitcoin adoption is going to continue to progress. Countries will continue to add Bitcoin as legal tender and all of this good stuff. How do you feel the same? I mean, we're also running.
There's a couple ways that you can look at this and measure it statistically. So there's something called the diffusion of innovation. And so you look at the way that new technologies reach mass adoption. So you can look at like how long did it take the telephone to reach 80%? How long did it take the internet to get 80%? Color TVs, washing machines, et cetera. And so you look at this diffusion of innovation, and then there's something called an S curve. And the way an S curve works is the time it takes to go from 0 to 10% adoption should be the same amount of time it takes to go from 10% to 90% adoption. So if we overlay that with Bitcoin, what we can see is that Bitcoin reached about 10% adoption by 2019, or in 10 years. So what that tells us is that then we should be able to go from 10% to 90% adoption in another 10 years, or by the end of the decade by 2030. And so really we've kind of got it's an S. So we've gone through the first flat spot, and now we should see this like really turn up this exponential growth to get to that 80 to 90% adoption by the end of the decade.
I mean, by the end of the decade, that's insane. And do you think we could still go so much adoption, so many people coming in? Do you feel that we could have a bad bear market again during that time where it's like a 1 to 2 year kind of downward spiral?
Unfortunately, we can. I mean, and this goes into a bigger picture, a bigger macroeconomic picture. And so I spent a lot of time focused on macroeconomics. As I said, back in 2008, I had to go figure out what this financial system is. And so I spent the last 12, 14 years researching it, studying it. And so, we're in this very scary place. And you're obviously much younger than I am. And so you haven't seen it, but I haven't seen it either. And so, I've lived in this historical anomaly. So this period of time that I've kind of been alive and paying attention has been mostly peaceful. There hasn't been a World War I, World War II. Like, it's been pretty peaceful. And we've had crazy wealth and prosperity. So in the United States, it's just been like hockey stick straight up, more technology and more wealth and more growth. Like when I was a kid, like we had like one pair of shoes and one pair of jeans, and that's just what people had.
Exactly.
Today, my kids have 20 pairs of shoes and 20 pairs of jeans, and it's just a different world today. But the problem is that the policy makers, the World Economic Forum, the Obama, Biden, Davos group, even in the EU, that group, they're putting policies into place to basically take us back to where we were 50 years ago. They are purposely shutting down our energy and shutting down our food on purpose. And so when you look at these policies that are put in place, it's a way to tell the future. And it's not like you need a crystal ball, but it's like, if you pass this law today, for example, the very first day Biden was in office, very first day one, by executive order, not by vote, don't care what anybody says, by executive order, I shut down oil pipelines and I shut down all the gas leasing. Okay, so that's a law that he put in place. So what happens? Well, you get less oil.
Yep.
Okay, so supply and demand. If we get less supply, but the demand stays the same, what happens with the price? Oh yeah, it goes up. Okay, so gas prices are the highest they've ever been. Now, gas prices affect everything. The food that at your store, your grocery store, your restaurant has to be delivered by truck. Everything drives off of oil. So now we have oil at a record high. We've never seen it this high ever in my life.
So insane.
So supply and demand. So if we want prices of gas to come down, what should we do? Increase the supply. But no, they're continuing to pass even more laws to restrict the supply. So what's going to happen with the price? Now, if the price of gas goes to $15 or $25 a gallon, what happens to the economy?
Crumble. It's going to be
and I
bad.
know this is crazy, but in 1974, I had to go ask my parents about this, and they don't really have a good recollection. But in 1974, in the United States, we had gas rationing, meaning you could only fill up your car on only certain days of the week. And on those certain days of the week, you would go there and you could wait in line for hours, and then hopefully they didn't run out before you got there. This happened in 1974. And the energy people that I'm following now are saying that we could see energy rationing happening, gas rationing happening again in the US this year. But it can never happen. Well, it did happen. It happened in 1974, and the policies they're putting in place are saying that. What about food rationing? Well, that could never happen, right? Well, it did. In the 1940s, the US government rationed food to people. It did happen. And it looks like it's going to happen again. So we had the farmers are being paid by the US government to not plant on parts of their land, paid to not plant.
That's happening now?
Yeah, it's been happening for a long time. What? And so now we're in this place where we have this food shortage, right? And they're saying, the UN is saying hundreds of millions of people could starve to death this year because we don't have food. So in the US, we have a massive food shortage. So the farmers, I have the quote right here. The farmers went and lobbied the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. And they said, hey, look, we have a food shortage. We need food. Let us plant on this area so we can get more food. And he said, I'm going to read it here to you. I'll quote it. He said, our domestic agriculture industry plays a critical role in the global effort to contain temperature increases under the United States' nationally determined contribution, which, get this part, which at the heart of our nation's commitment to Paris Agreement. So he basically said, no, you can't plant that land because we've laid down our sovereignty to the Paris Accord. And so we can't plant the land because we're trying to fight climate change. So you're going to starve or pay more for food because we're trying to fight climate. So this is the policies they're putting in place. And so where does that go? Does that lead to more food or less food? And if it leads to less food, then what happens to prices?
It goes up.
And so we're going into this really weird situation. You know, we're facing nuclear war with Russia, for the first time in my life, a very real threat where I'm actually really paying attention because it's like a real threat. And so we have these people making laws and policies today that have this massive effect. So for example, they've shut down so much oil and gas that they've been telling these oil and gas companies, we want you to go broke. We're going to try to get you bankrupt. Biden, when he ran for office, he said, we're going to try and make coal companies go bankrupt. And so when you're telling energy companies that you're going to try and make them go bankrupt, do they reinvest profits into their business or not?
Obviously not.
No. And so they don't reinvest into new exploration and drilling new holes and getting more supply. And so they haven't done that. And the existing supply, so when you drill a hole for oil or natural gas, it eventually runs out. So you have to constantly be finding new ones, but they haven't done any of that. So all the ones that we have now, it's going good now, but it's going to run out and we haven't reinvested in any new. So even if we had a magic wand and reversed it all right now today, it could take years to get on the other side of this. So I say all of this to go back to the question that you had, which was, do I think we can go into this prolonged bear market? And I don't know what they're going to do with this. Like, I'm watching this because if they continue to crash the economy seemingly on purpose, then I think most assets are going to do pretty poorly.
Whoa, why was none of this in my textbook? That's what I want to know. I do not ever remember learning about, I remember something in my textbook about in wars they had to ration, but that's something different. Like, none of
Hey,
that
but
was
but
in
but
my
but but,
textbook.
but is it something different?
I mean,
Aren't we at war right now?
we are
Haven't
at
we?
war. I mean, but
Yeah.
even beforehand, like, even at the beginning of COVID too, like there was a lot, like nothing on the shelf and there was not a lot being brought in, but there was nothing like of this magnitude at that time. Truckers weren't like not driving, gas was fine. So like even things before that were a little shaky as well. So now it's just like ever since the pandemic and this type of stuff has been
But
happening, it's just been spearheaded.
it was a war on COVID.
Like right beforehand though, the supply chain was a little shaky is what I'm saying as well.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of factors. So you have you have inflation is a misunderstood term. In today's terms, we look at CPI, consumer price inflation, and typically people think of inflation being prices going up. Per the Austrian economics view, inflation is when the money supply increases.
Yes.
And when the money supply increases, it creates all types of distortions, which the prices of goods going up is the result of the inflation of the money supply. So you have, they break inflation down into two categories. They call it cost push or demand pull. So cost push and demand pull. I'll break those down real quickly. So if we create more money and more people have more money, then we have more money chasing the same amount of goods. The demand, with more money, there's more demand for goods.
Yes.
Okay. And that causes the prices to go up. So supply chains were breaking down. Why? We don't know how to ship supplies anymore. Well, partly because of COVID, we shut it all down. So back to the war on COVID, but also we were importing 20% more goods, and the supply chains couldn't handle 20% more, especially once they had been shut down. So why were we getting 20% more goods? Oh, because all the money we printed. So that's the demand pull, but then we have the cost push. So because we shut down supply chains because of COVID, that we had less people working, we could have less supplies being shipped. So that was the cost. It pushed the cost of goods up. So we had both of those factors working. Now this is where it gets kind of scary. So the central banks, they can't print more food or energy.
No.
So if they want to fight inflation, the big inflation we have is food and energy are going high. So if we want to deal with that, what would we do? Well, we would increase supply. But they're not increasing supply. They're shutting supply down. So what other option do they have? Well, they could destroy demand.
This is
if gas is $25 a gallon, how much are you going to drive?
literally people can't drive.
So you destroy the demand for the gas. It's supply and demand, right? Supply and demand. If I lower the supply, then I lower the demand.
Oh my gosh, my mind hurts. This is so much. Like literally, like I completely understand what you're saying. My brain hurts because of like the trauma that people will be put through. Like even now, like I don't understand how a lot of people are surviving. People are making like even with wages, right? Like people are making the same amount of money, yet everything they have to do, whether that's driving, gas, or buying food, everything's just going up. So it's like we're also at this point where I was talking about this with my previous guest Gareth Soloway. Like, how do you like where's that middle ground, right? Like there is none.
Well, the problem is when you have a group of people that control everybody's fate. That's the problem.
Yeah,
and so it's centralization. That's the problem. So you have a group of people in Davos, Switzerland, or in Washington, D.C. that are making these policies that affect my life and your life. You have these people controlling the money that just increase the money supply by 40% in 2 years, and then just suck it right back out of the economy. You increase the money supply by 40%, you get crazy booms, and all these things start breaking down. And then just when everything's going good, then you suck it right back out and then crash it all back down. Why should anybody have the power to do that?
Exactly. Bitcoin, blockchain. We need it. And that's why
we need to separate money and state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know one of the big reasons I got in crypto was because I saw my purchasing power was going down and I was
Yeah.
sick of it. And that was like 20, I don't know, 18, 19, where I really had that epiphany. And I was like, listen, I cannot do this anymore. I do not want to partake in this. And that's why I started buying Bitcoin. And it's
Yeah.
been a good decision. And
Yeah.
I know that, you've been really like going so hard, and talking about this and everything. Do you mind shouting out your show as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm trying my best to get the information out there as fast as I can. Cause like, just this epiphany you had where like my brain's exploding. Like most people just don't really have any understanding of what's actually going on. And it's evil. It's intentional. Like I said, I read you a quote from Tom Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, saying, nope, you can't plant because, climate. So, I'm trying to wake people up. And so I put out a lot of content, YouTube, Mark Moss. I have a radio show, just search Mark Moss Radio, and I have a podcast, Mark Moss Podcast. So I'm putting out, I don't know, 6-7 hours of content in a week. You can find all that. Just search Mark Moss Podcast or YouTube, or just go to one Mark Moss, the number one Mark Moss, my website. You'll find all that stuff linked. And I'm probably way too active on Twitter. And you can find me there on Twitter, same at one Mark Moss.
Awesome. I'm putting your links in the chat. Thank you for coming and spending time with me today. I know you're such a busy guy and you're literally everywhere. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope you felt the zest today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a good conversation. Hopefully you and your audience got some value out of it.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely have added that zesty value that we were talking about earlier today. I really do love your insights, and I really, really did learn a lot today. I very much appreciate you breaking down a lot of these things. Hopefully I can have you come back soon and we could talk about more life in Bitcoin, because we really just broke down life. I know a lot of people in the chat needed to get their pens and papers out. So guys, if you found this insightful, please hit the likes, subscribe to the channel, and share out this stream with your friends, because there's so many lessons in here that during this podcast that I've been trying to tell people forever, and you articulated it in such a nice way. So I really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you to everyone that popped out in the chat. Really love you guys. Congratulations on today's winner, K9MM, for the Ballet wallet. I am going live again this week on Friday, so make sure you're subscribed. You have those post notifications on, because the zest will continue. It will never stop. It will never stop. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the week. I'll see you again on Friday. Enjoy the day. And as always, stay zesty. Peace.
Good morning, crypto Twitter, it's Misty